I'd like to call to order the May 7th, 2015 Board of Adjustment meeting. Before we begin our business, I'd like to welcome our newest member to the Board of Adjustment, Kevin Donaldson.
Thank you very much. I look forward to serving on the board.
Likewise, thank you very much, and we look forward to serving with you. Our first order of business is to receive the minutes of the April 16th, 2015 meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Register your vote. The minutes of April 16th are received. Do we have any continuance requests from staff?
We have two today. Item number 1, case number 14049 is requesting a continuance to June 4th, and item number 9, case number 14055 is requesting a continuance to May 21st.
I would entertain a separate motion for each of those requests.
What was the second case?
Number 9, case number 14055, Trey Resources, to May 21st.
I'll move that we continue item 1, case number 14049, until June 4th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Register your vote. Case is continued to June 4th.
And I'll move that we continue item number 9, case number 14055, until May the 21st.
Second.
A motion and a second. Register your votes. That case is continued. Do we have any continuance requests from the public? Hearing none, we'll proceed to our first case.
Item number 2, case number 14050 through 14052, request for use variance of Gastar Exploration, Inc. for a permit to drill 3 oil gas wells located at 7528 Northwest 150th Street, Suite A, B, and C.
Before you begin your testimony, let me just ask if Jimmy Lee Huff is still present. He had requested to speak on agenda item number 1, and that item has been continued. So you may leave if you wish. All right, thank you. Please, your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon. Braden Pollard, 3030 Northwest Expressway, Suite 500.
I'm going to go ahead and speak to your request.
Yes, sir. I'm with Gastar Exploration requesting the permit to drill 3 additional oil and gas wells at the location mentioned on a pad that's been built and currently has ongoing operations. Are there any specific questions on the case?
This application was this an amended application or is this a new application?
This is new.
This is new.
Because we had, I'm not crazy, we had one for one
Yes.
well.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
last meeting.
The last
There are 3
meeting.
new wells on the same pad site.
Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to speak on this case?
I'll move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the application. Register your votes. You are approved.
Thank you.
Item number 3, case number 14018, request of D.W. Converse for a variance to the 5-acre minimum lot size located at 12600 Southwest 89th Street.
Do we have someone to speak on this application? Board members?
Anyone in opposition here to speak?
Do you want to move it to the end of the agenda and give the applicant an opportunity to perhaps they're late?
Do you need a motion for that? Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right. We'll go on to case number 4.
Item number 4, case number 14043, request of Louis V. Lepac Trucking Company for a variance to the hard surface paving requirement and a special exception to allow an above-ground fuel storage tank located at 821 North Portland Avenue.
Jeff Lepak, 821 North Portland, Oklahoma City, 73107. There's several requests within here. There's several variances and a special exception. I'm not sure how the board would like me to approach that. Would we like to approach them one at a time, or would you like to present my case for all of them? Because you've received the documentation. This is a continuance from a prior meeting.
Yeah, I think we're all aware that we've got a variance request and a special exception request.
Right, fence height
There's a
and
couple
hard surface
variances,
paving
yes.
requirement? Yeah.
Yes. So do we want to address them one at a time, like the special exception? Or, okay. With regards to the special exception, 10,000 to 12,000 gallon tank, I noted that in the report that I received. Basically, you know, a fuel loaded tank's about 8,000 gallons, and 12,000 gallons would allow us to, be able to order timely fuel and have about 1,500 gallons due to the 90% restriction of the overfill protection of the tanks and everything else that goes along with it. The excess variance from 2.5 acres to 2.29 acres, we're landlocked. We have 2.29 acres. We are a little bit short of the request, but we have no chance to procure land or do anything else there. I also have submitted some documentation, if I may, with regards to the minimum separation requirements. I was asked last time what year the International Fire Code was that I was dealing with. That was given by the Sergeant Fire Marshal Rocky Miller. It is 2009 Fire Code. I also have here, if you'd like to see it, the exact same requirements from the National Fire Protection Association 30 Manual 2012. And I also have a document that mirrors the requirements that I have submitted and would like to adhere to from FEMA and the U.S. government on a coffee break training that lists the separation requirements that are different than the city code, in which I believe I stated that those are somewhat outdated and they go more in line with the other type of tanks that are used to be able to be put in that are no longer allowed in the city limits. The type of tank we're putting in is a totally different tank. One of the other variances was a secondary containment system. It has one built into the tank and does not require a separate vault for the tank to sit into or a plastic tub, per se, underneath the tank as the other tanks used to require years ago. The with request to the hard surfacing, it's my understanding that, I've been at that facility since 2008. It's been gravel since then. I don't know. I was told I had to get the variance for that to get my occupancy permit up there so that I could get the permit to do this. I'm a little new when it comes to doing all this stuff, so I'm learning as I go. But I was told that I had to get the variance, for the gravel surface, which is already there. We are not doing anything different than what has been there or what we have been operating as. The chain link fence requirement, as I stated, is 6 foot around. It is 8 foot. I have some pictures of that if you'd like to see that, of the chain link fence. It is 8 foot on the back sections with 6 foot fence with barbed wire, and the front of it is just 6 foot, does not have the barbed wire up front. That is really about it. If there's any questions.
Do you have a question? Do you presently have a above-ground fuel storage tank?
No.
So how have you been managing fuel for your vehicle?
We had a location in 2008 down at 722 South Walker that we had underground storage tanks. We have been fueling there. We have 36,000 gallons in the ground, so we are very familiar with the OCC requirements, the reporting. They come out regularly, test everything. We have compliance measures that we have to submit, tank tightness, all that. That facility was recently sold, through the downtown improvement areas, and we no longer own that property as of, Monday.
So with the sale of that property, you do not have fuel storage?
Correct. I do not have fuel storage, and, this is, quite honestly, the real reason for doing it is about $2,000 a week that it's costing me to have to fuel retail versus having an above-ground tank.
Okay. With that, unless the board members have any questions, let me excuse you.
Okay.
And the board had requested a representative of the State Fire Marshal's office. Is that representative here? If you would, just give us your name and address for the record.
Mike Wilson with the Oklahoma City Fire Marshal's Office, 2300 General Pershing Boulevard.
Are you familiar with this application and the issues that are before us?
I'm familiar with the issues. Another person in our office had actually talked with the applicant about the tank and the requirements. but I'm familiar with it.
Do you have any statement that you want to make now, or do you want to just respond to questions from
I
the
would
board?
respond to your question. The only statement I would say is that I don't know what the basis originally was for the tank standards. I don't know what the Planning Commission or Council recommended for that, if it was solely based on fire exposure or if there were other considerations that they were making. Our requirements obviously are based just strictly on the fire exposure issues. But I'd answer any questions you have.
When this was presented to us, and in fact in his statement in support of the application, the applicant indicates that what he's proposing to do is well within current standards and that the fire marshal's office is fine with this and so on. Can you comment about that to us, please?
Well, I had, what has been stated was that this was, there were two different terms used for this tank, Fire Shield and Fire Guard, which are different brands that the manufacturer has. Obviously, the standards for a protected tank are a certain listing that I believe I think the Fire Guard complies with. Let me look real quick. UL 2085, which is the standard for a protected tank, has to comply with. The unprotected tank requirements in the fire code talk about those separations of 150 feet from adjacent properties, significant buildings, and that's what I think in the code was kind of cut in half if it was a protected tank. In the fire code standards, a protected tank could actually be a lot closer to the property line than what the standards are in the zoning regulations.
Is the tank being discussed here a protected tank?
I'm honestly not sure because I've heard both of those terms, the Fire Shield and the Fire Guard. One specifically says it is a UL-listed tank, and the other isn't, I don't think. And so I'm not sure what they're actually proposing to buy.
But you don't recall which one is a UL listed protect, whether it's Fire Shield or Fire Guard?
It's Fire Guard.
Fire Guard.
That's what I was looking at.
Also in his application, the applicant makes a statement that it's his belief that the city code has not been updated to include the latest style of tanks. And is there some specific reason why that hasn't happened, or is it an accurate statement? Or?
I'm not sure it's inaccurate. It is an older standard. It has been in there for quite a while. The tank standards have changed since then. But I don't know if that separation distance was based solely on the fire code requirements about protected and unprotected tanks. I don't know if there were other issues that they were looking at.
When the ordinance was adopted, it was done in concert with the Fire Marshal's office. And that's where we got a lot of these standards. So I think you're right. I think the zoning ordinance really hasn't kept up with the tank technology. We didn't have a lot of the protected tanks back then. We were putting them inside dikes as second containment, and they don't even do that anymore.
Were there other considerations involved in the standards that were adopted?
From my recollection, we just, in most of those standards, we were just yielding to the Fire Marshal's office.
The requirement for an 8-foot fence versus a 6-foot fence, what's the can you help me understand that?
The primary issue with the fence enclosure was the standards for a tank in the fire department. It treats it a lot different if it's generally not available or open to the public, such that it's enclosed and only employees who are trained, that kind of thing, can get to that facility and use it. If it doesn't have a proper enclosure, then you might have exposure to just anybody walking up, and the fire hazard would increase if we have the tank in a situation that just anybody can get to it.
In your mind, does a 6-foot fence with barbed wire, is there a distinction there in safety from an 8-foot fence without barbed wire?
I'm not sure what the height of the 6 is, the barb.
Let me just,
Taller than the 6.
I think we need to clarify whether this is a 6-foot fence around the perimeter of the property or whether it's around the use, which
Right,
is
and
what
that's,
is specified.
the code talks about a self-closing gate and some other things, because they want that protection to keep it so that just anybody can't walk up to it. But as far as separation, if someone wants to get over a fence, it doesn't probably matter if it's 6 or 8 feet tall.
JJ, to clarify Jeff's point, I want to make sure I understand this. It says, chain link fence or non-combustible wall 8 feet in height from finished grade shall be provided around the use. Does that mean specifically around the tank?
We would consider it around, it could be around the entire property as long as it was secure.
Okay, so,
That goes along with the fire regulations on tanks.
all right, so then in your mind, is there, if it's a 6-foot fence or an 8-foot fence, does that really have that much of a bearing on safety?
I wouldn't think so.
Yes, there is. Mr. Miller, could we excuse you for a few moments? Mr. Miller? If you would just give us your name and address for the record, and then...
David Miller, 833 North Quapaw.
You're here to protest this application.
Yes, I am.
Go ahead and speak to that.
I understand the economic impact that this has for Mr. Lepak, but I'm wondering why he hasn't chosen an underground tank versus an above-ground tank. And my concern is the placement of the tank on the property. If you'll look in the northwest corner of the property, there's a cell phone tower that's in excess of 100 feet tall, which acts like a lightning rod. And my concern would be the placement of the tank in proximity to that.
Thank you. Could we invite the applicant back? You weren't signed up to speak, but let him respond to something, and then I'll... Exactly. Okay.
Can I make a statement real quick?
Certainly.
In regards to meeting your requirements, I am also going to have to go through the permitting office of the fire marshal and meet all of their requirements as well. It's not, I mean, there's a complete form and checklist that they go through that is a lot more stringent even than what we're dealing with right here with regards to the safety of the tank.
Quick question. Is your tank a fire guard tank?
It is a Flame Shield Fire Guard UL 2085 tank, and I submitted a brochure that verifies that as well with my documentation, a brochure of the tank.
Do you recall just offhand how close this tank will be to the property boundary?
It will be roughly, I mean, I'm meeting all the requirements, 25 feet, I think, 25 to 30 feet, 25 to, it'd be more than that, I think, away from the cell tower where the gentleman spoke about, be within 15 foot of our building, non-used building, or of the building, but it well meets all the other requirements as far as 25 feet that I am requesting.
Well, the requirement for a protected tank is no less than 50 feet.
That is in the old your code, yes, but not the NFPA Fire Marshal's Code and the International Fire Code, as well as the FEMA Protections Code that I've submitted. That's one of the variances that I'm requesting is from the minimum separation guidelines that the city code has in place.
I understand. JJ, is that Chapter 59, Section 9350.2.a, C, A, C, E, and F? That is what puts the 50 to 100-foot requirement in place, correct? Right. Okay. So that's what we have to look at is the ordinance that we're being asked to grant a variance from. So is it your position that even with a protected tank you would not be 50 feet?
That is what I'm requesting a variance from, yes.
Could you respond to Mr. Miller's comment about an underground storage tank, and are you considering that, or have you considered
I have not considered that because of cost. They are quite a bit more to maintain and initially install as well, and so we have not entertained that idea. They're about 3 times as much.
I'm going to tell you, though, that, in spite of what NFPA might require, I am going to have trouble supporting this request because of the proximity to the property line, proximity to buildings, proximity to that tower.
Okay.
I agree. I would actually like to hear from our other, I assume, protestant. But frankly, just the sheer number of things that need to be changed in order to make this work make me think that this is just not the right place for this use. I think we're talking about hard surface paving, fence height, the size of the tank, the distance from the property line, from buildings on site. It's just too much. This is obviously just not the right place for this.
Well, and I'm not saying that I don't agree with both of you that I'm having some trouble with this, but it's really about the proximity to property line. I mean, basically, from what we see, every property he's going to go out and buy is going to have a request for variance from hard surface paving, and he's got 6 feet of barbed wire with, 6 foot fence with 3 strands of barbed wire on it. So is it 8 feet or is it not 8 feet? It's probably not 8 feet by code, but that problem is going to exist in a lot of places too. I just don't want to get the ball distracted. I think that, at least for me, the hard surface paving requirement and the fencing, by way of the comments from the person from the fire marshal's office, those are really non-issues to me. I mean, I would support the application less than accept this idea that we're going to be less than 50 feet. That wasn't even a part of the application as presented. It was just the gallon requirement. Right? Am I wrong about that or right? I mean, so I guess my point is that I'm interested to hear from another protestant, but to me the only issue is, is this tank going to be able to meet the requirements, or are we willing to grant a variance based on the site factors?
And just for clarification, there are 2 issues. The variance request is to the hard surface paving. The special exception is for the above-ground storage. And most of our conversation has been about above-ground storage. So let's don't commingle those. Let's try to make sure that we address those. So my concerns may be more for the above-ground storage special exception request than the hard surface paving. But let's treat those as separate issues in our conversation.
Can I make I talked about, if you look at the guidelines that have been set forth by the fire marshal, they mirror your requirements for what is considered other tanks, okay, which is the old style of tank that they used to be able to put in the city limits. I mean, they basically mirror it. What I'm requesting is the newer updated tank standards, and that's the reason for the less than 50 foot away from the fence and stuff like that. I mean, the placement of the tank, because it's a newer standard and it's a different style of tank than what I believe is written into the code. They mirror each other, and you can't even put those other tanks in like is listed. If the fire marshal's still here, I think he would see that other tank in his guidelines that he had.
Well, you said about 25 feet is how far it would be from the property line?
It's probably about 30 feet, yes, from the back property line.
Just to be clear, the special exception is not to simply allow the tank. The tank, it's the size of the tank. You could have a 10,000-gallon tank. You needed special exception to go over that 2,000 gallons.
Because of the size of the parcel, am I correct?
And the reason for that, again,
It's just the size of the tank.
is due to the
You
capacity
can have
of
a
the tank.
10,000-gallon tank in an industrial district, but to exceed the 10,000 gallons requires a special exception.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the amount of fuel that you can actually get out of a tank with the overspill protection on there and what you can actually fill it up with. We would run out of fuel on weekends and stuff like that when we can't get a delivery till Monday with a 10,000-gallon tank if we're using it all weekend. So that's the reason for the extra 2,000 gallons.
But to be clear on your point, the tank under the terms of the ordinance has still got to be 50 feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me excuse you, and we've got another gentleman that wishes to speak. Yes, sir.
Yes, Bruce Smith. I am president of Atlas Asphalt Products. We are located at 3800 Northwest 8th Street. I am adjacent to and border this parcel property on the west and south sides. Okay, I have a common fence line with the Lepak property of 675 linear feet. I'd like to bring to your attention, last time I came in here, I wasn't quite prepared. I didn't read the Oklahoma City Municipal Code for construction. I have since pulled that up and read those. The LEPAC has made application under Section 9350.2, which is the above-ground flammable storage tank restricted. This section deals only with 10,000 or less gallon tanks. If you want to get a bigger tank, you would be applying under Section 8350.1, which is tanks in excess of 10,000 gallons. Okay, well, these two different types of applications have two different sets of rules and requirements. If you're going the general route, which is more than 10,000, the minimum size of the lot is 5 acres. You cannot be within 1,000 feet of residential zoning. You have to be 100 feet from any lot line. You must have a chain link fence or non-combustible wall of 8 feet in height. You must have diking around the storage area, and then you also must meet all the Oklahoma City fire and all state, federal air, water quality protection standards. Okay, that's the general requirement for anything above 10,000 gallons. Now, if you want to go 10,000 or less, you're under the other section, which is called the restricted section, which is 8350.2, storage tanks restricted. The requirements for restricted 10,000 gallons or less is 2.5 acres. Okay? You must have approval of the fire marshal, and you have to be 100 feet from all property lines. Now, if you have a protected tank, which is what he's proposing, a protected tank, you still must be at least 50 feet from all property lines and any occupied building. Okay? You still have to have a chain link fence or non-combustible wall 8 feet in height from finished grade, and you also must provide secondary containment for the tanks. And plus all the other state, federal regulations, water, and all that sort of thing. There's, as you can see, on either one of these general or restricted categories, the LEPAC property doesn't meet anything, doesn't meet any of them. The only way that he can get a 10,000-gallon tank is by exceptions or exceptions or lifting some of these requirements. I think the fence issue that he's talking about is a little exaggerated. I actually made a little packet for you guys. You can send that to them. And it's a copy, just to show you what we're talking about. On the front there is their property. Now, I did have discussions with him last month after the last meeting, and I asked him what kind of tank and where he was going to put it. Now, what he's proposing is a skid-mounted portable tank, self-contained tank with a dispensing unit on it, mounted on skids, that can be easily moved by really just putting a chain on it and dragging it with a truck. You can move it anywhere on site as long as you got power to it. Now, he's proposing it in the hash-marked area there on the diagram there. So he's going to put it in an 84-foot by 48-foot area. Now, I don't know the dimensions of the skid-mounted system, but, I mean, if you're putting a 12,000-gallon tank, horizontal tank, it's not a vertical tank, horizontal tank, it's going to take up a lot of room. And the only place you could really put it is over here in the corner, which is almost 0 to some footage away from the cellular tower, his occupied outbuilding, and the property line to the north there. Okay? If you turn to look at the next page, you can see his security fence, which it's 6 foot, 8 foot, I don't know what it is, but it's not secure. It's essentially broken down, and I don't think it would keep much out. The next 2 pages have 2 pictures of this fence that I'm discussing with you guys. As you can see, it can be easily breached by anybody. The next picture shows, you can see, it would be the 3rd picture in, you can see the 6 vehicles there. That's where he's proposing to put this tank. And on the left there, you can see the communication tower. Okay, now this tower is of importance that I'll get to here in a minute, but that's where he's proposing to put this. Now, if you look at the next page, that's a picture of the power. It's got the communication building, and in front of it, you'll notice that there is, if you turn to the next page, there's a gas generator there. So you've got an emergency generator for this communication tower that's going to be within less than 50 feet of this proposed above-ground, skid-mounted, portable fuel tank. Okay? And then if you look at the last picture there, this is what's on my site. Okay? We had a 1,000-foot setback. We were 100 foot within any occupied building. We have a containment. We have a fence around this thing. This is the model that the Corporation Commission used for their standards for the rest of the state. Now, this may be approved by the fire marshal, but it is regulated by the Corporation Commission. Okay? I want to address the communication tower. Section 9350.19 is communication services. This is the Oklahoma City Municipal Code. Section A is broadcast towers. They have two different types of towers, broadcast and telecommunications. They're restricted to a monopole, which this is, 200 foot in height, and it also starts talking about the collapsing of the tower and that in the restricted area, what you can do around a tower in case this tower falls. Some in the broadcast tower, you are restricted to 125% of the height of the tower. This tower, I guarantee you this tower is 200 feet tall. So that would be 250 feet that you are restricted to put in a tank or build a building or something. Now, somehow this tower got put in, I don't know. We probably didn't come down and do our due diligence like I am right now, and that's why we have this tower right there now. It also talks about that if in certain cases under the telecommunication tower section that the maximum height is 200 feet, and it says that under some restrictions that you can make within 75 feet. You can be restricted to 75 feet what you can do in some instances as determined by the Board of Adjustment. Let's talk a little bit about the hard surface of the parking lot.
Before we do that, I want to ask board members if they want to ask you any questions about the special exception request, which is the fuel storage tank, and then we'll move on to hard surface.
How many acres do you have on your site?
How many acres? 38.
38 acres? Where is this site located in reference to your, I've looked at your site on an aerial, but I don't remember exactly where are these tanks located inside your site?
They are, I don't know, 100 feet. You can see the picture of the kind of a building there around their property. They're just to the west of it. There's a structure or a building that we have occupied that we use for testing and some other dispatching and field services. It is over 100 feet west of that building.
So it's it'd be on the west half of your site.
Our site does continue off that map to the west.
Okay. But from what we could see, it would be somewhere on the west. Well, there's an unmarked street there running.
Yeah, that unmarked street has been condemned and vacated by the city, so it is no longer in use.
Where are the tanks in reference to that street?
Pretty close to it.
Pretty close to it, okay. So they're about the center of your site.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, is there anything that Mr. Lepak could do, given the nature of his site, the specific nature of his site, that would give you some comfort or make you support his ability to do that? Because to some degree, we can't, and this is kind of where I'm differing with my board members, he can go get a 10,000-gallon tank.
Well, not according to city code, he can't.
According to the ordinance that I've been given, I'll let JJ comment on that. Can you comment on that at this point? My point is, let's just presume, until JJ says that's not true, the ordinance we were given, he could do that. So if he could do that, and we know he could do it regardless, my question to you is, in what, I guess, is there anything he could do where you'd support the application?
No.
Nothing. He could build this exact same thing in the center of his site, and you still wouldn't
He
support it?
cannot meet the setback requirements. Now, I mean, if he put what we have installed and put it in the center of his property, he's got some staging issues with his trucks. And
Logistically, that would be
logistically,
pretty
he was
impossible.
going to have, well, I would think there would be problems.
Okay.
Now, what he's proposing, what you saw of my tanks, mine are vertical tanks. They have a small footprint. You can combine them in a smaller area. What he's proposing is a skid-mounted, self-contained, horizontal tank. So you can imagine one of those tanks laying down and on a skids that are essentially brought in legally, or probably on a trailer, and unloaded and scooted into position. It's more of a portable, temporary type tank system.
Okay, to answer your question, he needs a special exception to exceed the 10,000 gallon.
Well, he
Have a
needs a
10,000
special
gallon
exception
tank.
to even put a 10,000 or less on this site, because he doesn't meet the size requirement or the setback requirements.
He needs a special exception to exceed the 10,000 gallons on the site, but he still needs, he could do a 10,000 gallon tank, but he would still need variance to the location requirements that we've cited.
To get within 50 feet if it's not a protected tank, which he is. So
So we're looking at 50 feet because it's a protected tank, but he's still less than that.
I'm sorry, I mean, he does not fulfill any provision to put a tank on this site. It has to be it can only be done by exception by this board, because he does not meet the 2.5 acres, and he does not meet the setback requirements that are set
Correct.
forth.
That's the variances he's asking for.
That's what he's asking for. So
He's asking for
according
those
to the
variances.
code, he does not meet any requirement that's on this code. He has to have an
But that's-
exception from you all on almost every item.
But that's why he's here.
That's why he's here.
And my point is he's going to put a 10,000 gallon tank out there, no matter what we do, as long as he keeps it 50 feet from his property line, because there's nothing that we could do or that you could do to prevent that from happening.
Well,
But it is
Now, wait a
within our...
second. Now,
Hang
he
on.
has to have an exception from you guys to even put the tank in.
That exceeds 10,000 gallons.
Correct.
He
Okay.
doesn't meet the 2.5 acres requirement. He has 2.29 acres. He does not meet the 2.5 acres requirement. That is the minimum requirement size of a lot to put a fuel tank on.
That's correct. That's one of the variances he's asking.
That's right. So, yes, you're saying you have no power. Yes, you do.
Wait, who's on... Oh, he can put a 10,000 gallon tank on this site, even without an exception from us. Is that correct?
No.
He would not need the
No.
exception. He would still need the variances
He
to the
would still
location,
need the variances to the location.
unless he could meet.
The only variance we've got before us in this
That's-
application is hard
thank you.
surface.
That's my point. So, okay.
Is the what?
The hard surface paving is the only variance request that we have before us today. The special exception deals with fuel storage
You
tank.
you have a variance to the lot size, the separation from the property line as well.
Yeah.
It says
All on there.
variance to the hard surface paving requirement and a special exception to allow an above-ground fuel storage tank. And then the
Well,
oh, I see.
Zoning ordinance, where we cite this section. Yeah.
Any other discussion about it?
Back to my point, there are too many problems with the location of this use at this site to be overcome here, in my view.
Let's move on and talk about the variance request for the hard surface paving. And go ahead and share your comments.
I'm just going to share with you your own code. Is essentially all I'm going to read to you is that Section 10250.2, paving on off-street parking areas. Essentially, since this is a parking staging area for industrial use, whatever, he does have the right to request or put in an alternate pervious surface. but even that has some minimum requirements. The alternate surface must meet the following standards: traffic-bound surface course as specified by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, 8 inches of cement-killed dust with 5 inches of dust-free asphalt millings, or 3 to 4 inches of crusher run over 1.5 inches to 2 inches of gravel, or some kind of equivalent as approved by the director. Sub-base preparation is a requirement. Now, Section 3 is one, it says all pervious surface areas shall have a 6-inch thick, 12-inch wide concrete border to keep the material in place. As I said last time I was here, one of the issues we have is that the material that's on his lot and the oil drippings and all the other refuse that's on the line runs off his property onto ours and into our watershed that we have to test. We tested it yesterday even because we are required, and he may even be falling under these requirements, I don't know. Of course, he may get a variance because he's less than 2.5 acres, but his waste or contamination flows on us, contaminates our water, then we sample it, and it makes an undue burden on us to try to pass these tests with contaminated water coming in from an outside source. Okay? So this, your provision, your city code has made provision for this, saying that you have to put a concrete ribbon curb, essentially, around your property to hold this material in place. It goes on to talk about striping and organizing your lot to make it safe for traffic and logistics and movement of trucks and that sort of thing. So essentially, I mean, this lot fulfills no requirements of any city code.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to excuse you right now. Before we take action on this request, I want staff and council to make sure that all board members are clear what the scope of the variance request is, what the scope of the special exception request is, because my impression from, this application is that the variance request only deals with the hard surface requirement, and that the special exception deals with the fuel storage tank. And if that's accurate, if staff or council can affirm that, then I would be ready,
Okay.
Before we do that, I have a question. Mr. Smith indicated that there actually is a provision of the code that deals with tanks in excess of 10,000 gallons. So why isn't this application why isn't this that?
There's 2 categories for above ground fuel storage. The restricted category is for fueling of your own vehicles on your own property, not for your own use, for your own fleet, for your own use. And that's limited to 10,000 gallons. But the category allows you to go over 10,000 gallons with a special exception from the Board of Adjustment. The other category, the general category, is for tanks that exceed 10,000 gallons, but they are not associated with dispensing of fuel into fleet vehicles. It's for a bulk storage like a tank farm. You'd load up a tanker truck and take it to the gas station. So it's a much larger scale operation.
I see.
But you get 10,000 gallons if you meet all the requirements, but if you want to go over that, you come to the Board of Adjustment and make your case to go over that.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
There's no further discussion from board members or questions for the applicant or anybody else here to speak on this application. I would call for us to take action on the variance request and make sure that we're defining that as the request to waive the hard surface paving requirement.
Well, you can vote on the variances separate. You can vote on the paving requirement. But there is also, for the tank, he's asking for a variance to the 2.5-acre lot size because he only has 2.29. The separation from the property line, and the separation from an occupied building on the site.
Then that's your clarification on what the variance is. It's more than hard surface.
And I'm going to move for denial of the variance request.
And again, we're not voting to deny the whole application. We're simply dealing with the variance request first, then we'll deal with the special exception
Right.
as a separate item. I have a motion.
Can we not separate the variance to the hard surface paving requirement from the issues that deal with the storage tank?
Staff and council are indicating that we can.
I would like to have separate motions made on those. If you want to recraft your motion for which one you're moving denial on,
I don't mind going down the list. I'll move for denial on the hard surface paving variance.
I have a motion.
I'm going to move for approval on the hard surface the paving requirement.
We already have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Motion dies, so the board you now have the option of making a new motion.
I would make a motion that we approve the variance for the hard surface paving requirement.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the variance for the hard surface paving requirement only. Register your vote. Pardon me, aye. That motion is denied.
Automatically continued.
Yeah, it'll be,
Tied.
we need to have 3 votes, either direction to either.
There needs to be 3 to deny, okay.
has to be-
So automatically continued, okay, and then, and then automatically continued to the next meeting, is that the proper protocol, or is that something that we,
Yes, unless anyone wants to move that it's continued to a separate meeting beyond the, what is it, the 19th, I think?
do we want to go ahead and act on the rest of the application, and then we'll see where we stand on that?
It'll be the 21st, I think. Well, I think that it would be more appropriate to continue the entire item, but if that's not the will of the board, I'll be glad to make a motion to deny the 2.5-acre lot size requirement.
And I will second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Register your vote. That application that portion of the variance request is denied.
So then I will make a motion to deny the variance to the separation requirement. Do we want to do property line and structure separately, or do we care?
I'm comfortable with us combining those. I think it's pretty clear where we're headed here.
So I'll move to deny the variance to the separation requirement on both the property line and the structure.
We have a motion.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Register your vote. That variance request is denied.
Now, since we've denied that, do we even need to make a motion on the special exception for 10,000 to 12,000? That seems kind of...
It's still on the table.
Okay, well then I would make a motion that we also deny the special exception to allow the increased size of the above-ground storage tank.
We have a motion and a second. Register your vote. The special exception is denied. The only matter before us is the 21st is the next meeting. Is that an acceptable date for the applicant to continue the one variance request?
Is there any point in doing that?
There is no point to doing that at this point that I can see. My understanding.
That will require him then to come into compliance, is that correct?
No, he's legally non-conforming as he sits now. Now, if he comes in for some kind of a building permit in the future, it will come up again.
So will he need to formally withdraw his request for variance on the hard surface paving, or how, procedurally, where do we go on this?
He'll need to approve it, deny it, or he'll need to withdraw it, one of the three.
So if we could invite the applicant back to the podium, and then if you wish to withdraw that request formally, then we'll act on that request.
I'll withdraw that request at this time.
Okay.
I make a motion that we withdraw his request.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Register your vote. We've approved your withdrawal. Thank you, sir.
Item number 5, case number 14047, request of Bricktown Apartments LLC for a variance to the sign regulations located at 505 East Sheridan Avenue.
Paul LaFever for the applicant. Kathy Bridges, who represents the applicant, is here with me. This is a apartment complex to be built off Sheridan on a 5-acre site in East Bricktown. It is a 250-unit complex in 2 structures and a parking garage. The proposed sign has gone through the Bricktown Design Review Committee, and they've recommended approval to you. The issue is that a freestanding sign is not allowed in the Bricktown area. We're feeling like this sign is not that. It's referenced as a truss sign in the staff report, but the point being is that the architecture of the project is trying to reflect not only the heritage of the steel yard use for decades on the site, but also the Bricktown location. And I think that, we're hoping you'll agree, that the proposed truss sign is a very appropriate style and size of a sign. It is really an entryway sign to the entire complex, and given the size of the complex and the area, we think it does its job very well. It is not, it serves almost as a wall sign, though technically it's not that either. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
I would note that the rendering of the sign, the proposed sign, is dated the 5th of May, 2014, and that year the report is showing that Bricktown Urban Design Committee recommended approval in July of 2014. I also see the Bricktown Design Review Committee is shown as recommending approval. Was it in the same time frame?
Yes.
Last summer? Mm-hmm. Has the rendering that we're looking at today, is it the same dimensionally?
Yes.
In total, that's what they saw
Yes.
almost a year ago.
I have a question really for staff. Is the variance that's being requested to that portion of the Bricktown guidelines that indicate that there will be no accessory signs, or is it to the requirement that they obtain a revocable permit? If we approve the variance, do they still have to go get a revocable permit?
If you approve the variance, they would still need a revocable if it's on the right-of-way.
There's some indication in the staff report that a revocable permit would be needed. So this action will not affect that one way or the other?
Yeah, this is driven, I believe, because of a monument, a freestanding sign limitation is the issue.
Freestanding, I'm sorry, I said accessory, but yes, freestanding, okay. You won't hear this very often, Paul, but I'm going to move approval.
That's very good.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Register your vote. You are approved.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Item number 6, case number 14053, request of Wayne McDoulet for a variance to the sign regulations located at 2323 Southwest 44th Street.
If you would, give us your name and address for the record.
Wayne McDoulet, 1949 Greenwood Lane in Newcastle, Oklahoma.
Want to tell us about your application, what you want to do?
Yeah, we're asking for a variance to increase the height of the sign. It's 8 foot is what the requirements for the R1 is, and this sign meets the square footage requirements, but not the height requirement.
Again, a question of staff, wouldn't we want to see an 8-foot monument sign in any event, whatever the zoning was?
I'm sorry.
We want to see an 8-foot monument sign no matter what the zoning was underlying it? It's not just because it's R1, is it?
Yes. Yeah, if it were a commercial district, a church in the commercial district, he could have a much taller sign. It's a non-residential use in a residential zoning district is restricted to an 8-foot ground sign.
Is there anyone here in opposition?
Not that I'm aware of. Anybody in the public to speak on this application? No.
I would move that we approve the application.
Not in support of this application. I don't think that there needs to be a 13-foot monument sign here. And the drawing that is attached that indicates the size of it is a really good example of why. I just don't see any need for it. I don't see any requirement that it be any taller than the 8 feet that's allowed.
And for the benefit of Kevin, this is his first meeting, since we're short a board member, I cannot make a motion or second a motion, so we have a motion. Janice has indicated she will not support the application, so it falls in your court.
Is there any way you can make this sign smaller?
Well, the design, y'all have a copy of it there. It's a graphical representation of a religious symbol, and that was really the reason to extend it to that height, because to represent that would be very difficult, and to keep it under 8 feet.
I don't think I can support it.
Okay. We do not have a second to the motion, and there's no second going to be offered, and so that automatically continues.
I'll make a motion that we deny the application.
That is the motion on the floor. Did we have a previous motion, or am I?
I had moved that we approved it, but they didn't get a second.
Dies. So it dies.
She's now made a motion that we deny it.
To deny the application.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to deny the application. Register your vote. Your application is denied, sir.
Item number 7, case number 14054, request of Lynn Operating, Inc. for a variance to the sign regulations located at 14701 Hertz Quail Springs Parkway.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. What we are requesting today is a variance to the size of an attached sign. This is a building that will be 4 stories. It's well under construction right now. For the purpose of understanding where we're at and what we're asking for, Lance, is there any way to rotate that? Lynn Energy is building a new structure, which is the structure you see before you and what I handed out. They are currently not too far from where they're building. The size of sign we're requesting is almost identical to the size of sign they currently have on their building that they're in now. When you look at what we're requesting, I would submit that it's in scale for a 4-story building. What the code would require is 150 square feet of signage on a 4-story building of this size. Would be very small. It would not allow the traveling public to notice what building or where Lynn Energy was located, and frankly, I think it would look a little awkward at that size. So what we think we've asked for is something reasonable, something not excessive, but something that will look attractive and in scale on a building of this size. Staff has identified no unfavorables, and we would ask for your support.
Just for clarification, this is going to be a lighted sign, and that is not the matter before us. The only thing that's before us is the variance from the size. Correct.
Just as a matter of curiosity, I see that the zoning on the property, PUD 302, is very old.
Correct.
So signage was not part of the negotiation in the PUD originally?
The PUD only deals with, so if you can envision PUD 302, it is a massive PUD that encompasses this entire office complex. It broke certain tracts into commercial, certain tracts into office. It only dealt with pole signs for the commercial tract. So I believe the way it's been interpreted is attached signage has to meet the base zoning, that being 02 in this particular tract, therefore the 150 foot. So no, attached signage was not specifically negotiated.
I have to say, we frequently have this language that appears in these applications that says that the sign regulations limiting the display area for attached signage do not take into account the height, scale, and mass of larger office towers. And I absolutely, categorically disagree with that statement. The sign ordinance was painstakingly negotiated over a long period of time. Many battles were waged, much gnashing of teeth and pulling out of hair. And I just absolutely am insulted by the inference that we just didn't think about this at the time that we adopted the sign ordinance, and that, therefore, we need to do something different on every sign request that comes in and says, we need a bigger sign.
Well, that language is my language. That's not your staff's language.
I understand that.
But here's why.
I understand that.
The sign code deals with lineal feet, so it does not address taller buildings. If we had a one-story building, maybe what the code allows is fine. But because it doesn't address going up, our argument is, if we're only doing lineal feet...
Because that's not one of the factors that it cites in its calculations, you mean.
Right.
I don't think that it's fair to say that that was not considered or addressed.
Well, I think when you look at the rendering, I would submit that that is not a large sign. So to use what the zoning code would allow, that would allow the 150 square feet, sure, that's appropriate on a single story, maybe even two-story. But these large buildings, when you get up into the mass that we're dealing with, the lineal footage calculation creates a hardship.
You're entitled to your opinion on that subject, certainly.
Is there anyone here in opposition to the application?
There's no one signed up to speak on the application. Anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this application? There are none.
I would move for approval of the application.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second to approve the application. Register your vote. You are approved.
Thank you.
Item number 8, case number 14048, request of Sylvia Cox for a variance to allow 2 dwellings on one lot, the minimum side yard setback and the minimum separation between structures located at 1110 Northwest 44th Street.
Please give us your name and address for the record, and pull the microphone down a little bit there so we can hear you. Thank you.
Sylvia Cox, 515 Northwest 33rd, Oklahoma City, 73118. Basically, we're applying for a variance to allow the 2 dwellings to be reconstructed on the lot. The buildings were built in the 1920s, and they have been in an existing footprint since then. The way the current zoning reads, it wouldn't allow us to build the second structure if it burns more than 60%, and therefore, when appraising the property, the second structure can't be appraised, so it does create hardship for the future if we try to sell the property.
Any questions for the applicant or discussion?
My initial reaction to this was that perhaps it would be better addressed as a rezoning request. But after giving that a little bit of thought, I decided I really would rather it not be. So I'm going to move approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Register your vote. You are approved.
Thank you.
You need to go back to item number 3.
Item number 3 was moved to the end of the agenda because the applicant was not present. Is the applicant present?
A little unclear about why this was continued the last time. I couldn't quite remember. We've seen this application before, have we not? And
Actually, twice you've seen it.
Yeah, and why have we continued it previously?
It was an application originally to do the lot split, to the minimum lot size. But then we suggested, or I think the board suggested, they wanted it to be moved more towards the medical hardship mobile home. They didn't want to do a home, so he was going to talk to his client if we were going to re-notify.
So the application hasn't changed?
Nothing has changed.
Okay. Well, I guess I don't have a strong feeling that we shouldn't continue it one more time, although frankly, as it is, I think I'd be very comfortable denying it. If other members of the board have thoughts they'd like to share on that subject.
We have the option of denying the application because the applicant did not appear. We also have the option of continuing. The next meeting is May the 21st.
I'd move that we continue it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue that case to May the 21st. Register your vote. Approved.
I will contact him and see that there will be action at the next meeting.
If there's no other business before the board, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to adjourn. We are adjourned.